Coalition, the Historic Districts Council, and we've been working with a bunch of different groups here in the neighborhood about preserving these buildings and how outraged we are that the city is allowing them to be demolished to make way for this 300-room hotel that nobody wants and nobody needs. The mayor talks about the desperate need for affordable housing in the city, which is true, and here he is allowing dozens and dozens of units of housing, of what was once affordable housing, to be demolished to make way for his friend, his political contributor, his allies' hotel development that will simply house globe-trotting young people with disposable income who are here for a few days and then gone. We love tourists. They're great. They're important. They're not quite as important as long-term residents who need housing in this neighborhood. It's all, and whatever is going to replace this is not going to be nearly as valuable and as rich in history as these 5 buildings built in the 1880s and 1890s to house immigrant families coming here, escaping revolutions and famine and poverty across Europe, who made homes for themselves here, who built this community, who built New York, and then over the years, the struggling artists and musicians and writers and just average New Yorkers who lived in these apartments, who made lives for themselves, whether they were people whose names we will remember forever, or just average New Yorkers who only their friends and family know. They're an integral part of the fabric of this neighborhood, of the story of our history, of the history of our city, which this is simply going to erase. And what's particularly galling about this is that in 2008, the city itself, through its Landmarks Preservation Commission, deemed that these buildings were eligible for landmark designation. And yet, in what may come as no surprise to anybody, the Landmarks Preservation Commission sat on their hands and did nothing about it for years. But then, when the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation and Historic Districts Council, East Village Community Coalition, Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, when we became aware that there was going to be a plan to demolish these buildings to make way for this hotel, we reached out to the city and we said, hey, here are these great buildings with this wonderfully rich history. We're going to provide you with all the documentation and the research about why they're so important and worthy of preservation. We're also going to show you and remind you that in 2008, you said that these buildings were worthy of preservation and of landmark designation. They haven't moved ahead with the demolition permits yet. You still have time to act. And what did they do? They did nothing. For 2 months, we waited for a response from the Landmarks Preservation Commission, the city's agency, the mayor's agency charged with preserving our city, our history, our neighborhoods, and they did nothing. They did nothing. After the Department of Buildings issued demolition permits, and only after they issued them, then the Landmarks Preservation Commission wrote to us and said, well, we've looked at the buildings and we don't think they're worthy of landmark designation. With no explanation for why just a few years earlier they looked at the buildings and said, these are eminently worthy of landmark designation, and now they weren't. Because nothing had changed about these buildings except who owned them. And who owned them was the Lightstone Group, whose CEO and founder has been a major fundraiser for the mayor, a major contributor to the mayor, and those very contributions are right now under investigation because of some purported irregularities and potentially even illegalities about them.
Corruption. Get rid of him.
So we are here today to call on the mayor to do the right thing, to live up to his supposed promise of prioritizing affordable housing, preserving housing in our neighborhoods, to intervene with the Landmarks Preservation Commission, which is his agency, to intervene with his friend who owns these buildings and who's planning to demolish them, and to say, we have to do the right thing here. These buildings should be preserved. This housing should be preserved. This is what makes our neighborhood and our cities work, not what they're proposing to put here, and instead a 300-room hotel which nobody needs and nobody wants. can right now, just on your smartphone, just go to the URL that we have here, GVSHP.org/11th Street, with a couple of strokes. You can send the mayor an email directly right now saying, I want you to preserve these buildings, stop being a hypocrite, live up to your promise, preserve our neighborhood, preserve our history. Also, make sure you do not leave here today without signing those petitions. We will make sure that your message gets to the mayor. So I'm going to ask to join me to say a few words. Somebody who is certainly not new to these kinds of fights, who represents this area all along the west side and lower Manhattan, State Senator Brad Hoylman.
First, let me just thank Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation, HGC, the Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, the East Village Community Coalition. Let's give them a round of applause for all of them. These buildings are the fabric of our neighborhood. And what's wrong with this picture? In 2008, as Andrew said, they were eligible for landmarks designation, and suddenly, today, in 2016, we can't even get an explanation as to why they aren't.
Follow the money!
Something is wrong with this picture. And I'll tell you this, we are not going down without a fight. Is that right? We have 5 remarkable buildings here. 5 buildings that represent the history of this neighborhood, represent tenants who have come here from all parts of the globe, who have founded this part of Manhattan, who have built it to what it is, and we want to erase their memory for a 300-room hotel? Is that right? No! Is it right to let Marriott Corporation bring in something called Moxie Hotel Group? No! A hotel that's geared toward so-called millennials? Who know nothing of our history, who obviously care nothing of our history, who are happy to erase our history. That is not right.
It is wrong.
So I am so encouraged by the turnout today, but I am so discouraged that the Landmarks Preservation Commission, the entity set up by the city charter to weigh in on important historic sites like the one before us, has not even deigned to give a written response to groups like the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation and the Historic District Council as to why these buildings suddenly are ineligible for protection. That, my friends, is wrong.
You're crook.
So I hope you will continue to weigh in, to fight, to urge, to cajole, to sit, to raise our voices in objection. We need affordable housing, yes.
Yes.
We don't need